Hello and welcome to the BMC MainView for DB2 course trainings. My name is Trish Nolan and I am a MainView software consultant. In this session, you will learn the steps necessary to start, display, and manage your traces. Before moving on to the views which you will utilize to start and manage DB2 traces from within MainView for DB2, we should cover a few rules of thumb for MainView for DB2 traces. MainView for DB2 does include the ability to start DB2 summary and detailed traces. Remember, the initiation of a detailed DB2 trace adds additional overhead to your DB2 subsystem CPU utilization, and this should be performed judiciously. Traces that are initiated within MainView for DB2 should always be captured to a physical trace log dataset, also known as a TLDS. Otherwise, trace data may be lost. Users attempting to start traces with a MainView for DB2 must also have the appropriate DB2 authority to perform traces. The MainView for DB2 product address space must also have the authority to start DB2 traces. Three distinct traces are started by default at MainView for DB2 product initialization. The thread hist trace contains all completed DB2 threads for each subsystem. The big elapsed trace contains only those threads that executed over 10 elapsed or wall clock seconds. The MV DB2 DC is known as the data collector trace, and this should be the trace that is only used and displayed on the HT views. The slides which follow in this section pertain specifically to the thread hist and big elap and user-initiated application traces. We will start from our Easy DBA menu. On the left-hand side of this menu, in the Traces section, you will put your cursor on the traces-current/st command and press Enter. You are then presented with the CT or Current Traces view. This view should display both the big elap and thread hist traces that are running for your current DB2 subsystem. At the top of this screen, you also have line commands which are available for your use. The S command will select a particular trace for displaying. The W command will show the parameters that were used to start that trace. The Z command will stop the trace, yet retain all associated trace data. The P command purges and stops the trace, but also deletes the trace data. Place your cursor on one of the trace IDs, such as thread hist in this case, and press Enter to display the contents of a trace. You are once again presented with the HT logs view. From the HT logs view, you should now place your cursor on the number records column for the thread hist trace and press Enter. You are then taken to the HTI-QZ view. This is the view that provides the 15-minute summarization of your thread history. As you recall, you have two options for drilling down on information from this view. You can either drill in on the end time to further break down the 15-minute summarized intervals into 5-minute and 1-minute increments, or you can drill directly in on the record count field to go to a list of individual threads for that time period. On the HTI-QZ view, you also have an option on the upper left-hand side titled TLDS All Recs. When you hyperlink on this option, you will be taken to a listing of all the individual threads within the current trace. The TRL track view is displayed listing all the individual threads. In order to drill in and get the details for each thread, you drill in on the end time for a given thread. Place your cursor on end time and press enter. The TRS track view is then displayed. Once again, you can use your highlighted hyperlinks on the right-hand side to go to a particular section of the information, or you can use your PF8 key to scroll down sequentially through the information. Let's navigate back to our Easy DBA menu now and go into viewing history traces. On the left-hand side of our Easy DBA menu, under the Traces section, place your cursor on the Traces-History Admin option and press Enter. You are taken to the HT or History Traces view. The blue line items indicate traces that have been run at a previous point in time and are complete, and the green line items indicate traces that are still currently running or active. You can drill in on any past trace or current trace simply by putting your cursor on the trace ID and pressing Enter. This takes you into the individual thread listing. You can drill in on the end time for any thread and display the details pertaining to that thread. There are also highlighted hyperlinks at the top of this screen that allow you to summarize the list of threads by authorization ID, connection type, plan, time, location, and correlation ID. When you drill in to display individual thread details, you are presented with a panel that also provides highlighted hyperlinks near the top that you can use to navigate directly to a section of information within the thread detail data, or you can use your PF8 key to scroll downward through the information. Now let's navigate back to our Easy DBA menu once again to start a DB2 trace. On the left-hand side of this screen, under the Traces section, place your cursor on the option titled Traces-Current/ST and press Enter. You are displayed with the CT or Current Traces view. On the command line at the top of your screen, type the letters ST for Start Trace and press the Enter key. You will now be presented with a series of 5 dialogues where you will enter your trace criteria. Start on the upper right-hand side in the Target field and verify that the DB2 subsystem in that field is the one where you wish to start the trace. If it is not, overtype this field with the DB2 name where you wish the trace to be started. Moving to the left-hand side of this dialog in the PARM field, you will enter your trace name 1 through 8 characters. Underneath the PARM field, in the Type field, enter the letter S for a summary trace or the letter D for a detail trace. Moving back over to the right-hand side of the dialog panel, in the Start field, this indicates at what time you wish the trace to start. If you do not enter a time in this field, the trace will start immediately after entering all the specific trace criteria. You can enter a start time up to 24 hours in advance, and the trace will not start until that time is reached. Moving on to the stop time, you can enter a number of minutes that the trace should run. If you do not enter a time, the trace will run until you stop it manually. You can also enter an actual stop time at which this trace should be stopped. The storage field indicates how much storage is set aside in memory of the MainView for DB2 address space to store the trace data before it is written out to physical DASD. It is recommended that you take the default for this field. The log trace field should always be set to Y, as this indicates that you do want to log the trace data to a physical file. The wrap field indicates how you want to handle the data in memory when the area in memory fills. Yes indicates that you want to begin wrapping the data in memory from the beginning and overwriting the oldest data. No indicates that you will not wrap the data and you will not continue to write any more data to memory. The RST field is the restart field. This indicates how you want to handle the trace should MainView for DB2 be brought down while the trace is running. The hot parameter indicates that when MainView for DB2 is brought back up, you want this trace to be initiated again using all the same parameters as it was when it stopped. The purge command indicates that you do not want this trace to be restarted, and all associated data with this trace will be deleted. The QIS or QIS command indicates that you do not want the trace to be restarted. However, you do want to keep all associated data that was collected for this trace prior to MainView for DB2 being stopped. In the title field, provide a meaningful title name so that you can easily identify and differentiate your trace. Under the Specify Additional Trace Options section, let's start with the selection criteria. Put a Y in this field, as you'll want to be able to indicate which plans and correlation ID, etc. you want this trace to run against. The Exception Filters column is used to specify select criteria that you want to utilize for limiting what data is actually written to your trace file. The Detail Trace Options field should be set to Y when you are trying to initialize a DB2 detail trace. This indicates how you will be setting up and what kind of detail traces you will be executing. The Trace Log Datasets Options field should also be set to Y. This will display the dialog panel where you will specify the criteria for your physical trace log dataset. Once you have entered all the information on the previous panel, you press the Enter key and you are presented with the DB2 Trace Selection Criteria panel. This panel is of particular importance when you are initiating a detailed trace. When you are initiating a detailed trace, you must specify at least one valid plan name or the auth ID in the selection criteria of this dialog. If you are not executing a detail trace and are running a summary trace, these fields are optional. Press Enter and you will be taken to the DB2 Trace Exception Filter panel. This is where you can identify criteria that filters out trace records to just those records that meet the criteria that is specified on this panel. All these conditions that are shown on this panel are ORed conditions, meaning that if any one of these conditions is met, the trace record will be written to the trace file. In this example, we have entered a 5.0 in the CPU field, which indicates only those threads that execute over 5 CPU seconds will be saved and written to the trace data file. Press Enter, and then you are presented with the DB2 Detail Trace Options panel. The upper section of this panel is used to specify which type of detailed DB2 trace you wish to start. If you want to start a SQL trace, you would put a Y in the SQL column. If you want to start an IO trace, you would put a Y in the IO column. You can have multiple trace types executing in a single DB2 trace. In the Specify Event Compression section, take the default set to Group SQL Y. In the Specify Data Collection Buffer Options field, this indicates how much area and what number of buffers will be used to store your detailed trace data. It is recommended that you take your installation defaults for TR size and TR buff. If you leave the TR buff column blank, this will allow the defaults to take effect and will allocate the maximum number of buffers allowable to store your trace data. When you press Enter, you are presented with the Trace Log Dataset Options panel. On the number of logs field, you can specify a number from 1 to 99 to indicate the number of physical log files that should be used to store your trace data. The first log DSN field is used to specify the name of your trace log dataset. Should you choose to supply a dataset name here, you must enclose that dataset name in single quotation marks, and the last node of the dataset name must end in .v01. Should you choose not to supply a dataset name, it will default to the installation supplied dataset name, which is highlighted in white below. The dataset name that is specified for your trace log datasets, whether you're specifying a unique dataset name or the installation supplied default, must have the appropriate ACF2, RACF, and or top secret authority so that the MainView for DB2 address space can allocate and write to that dataset name. The overwrite logs field is used to indicate that once all of your trace log datasets are full, you want to begin overwriting those logs from the first log forward. If you do not wish to overwrite your trace log datasets, place an N in this column, and once all of the trace log datasets are full, trace logging will be stopped. However, the trace will continue to run. The archive proc field is used to specify a JES proc name, where you can create standard IDCAM's repro JCL to archive a trace log dataset as it fills. This proc name must reside in a JES proc lib. The log switch time field is used to provide a specific time at which you want one of the logs to switch. For example, if you wish the log to switch at noon, you would enter 12:00 in the log switch time field. The disposition field is used to indicate the disposition of your trace log dataset. If you are creating new trace log datasets, you type new in this field. If you are reusing existing trace log datasets, you type old in the disposition field. Supply the volume IDs for one or more volumes in the volume field where the trace log datasets will reside. In the primary cylinders field, provide a number of cylinders that should be allocated to each trace log dataset. Keep in mind that detailed traces require more size, so you should adjust the primary cylinders accordingly for detailed traces. The data DSN suffix is used to designate the last node that will be appended to the data component of the VSAM trace log dataset. You can either leave this at the supplied D value, or you can supply 1 to 8 characters of your choosing. If you are an SMS managed shop, you can also supply your SMS parameters to the right. When you have supplied all of the parameters on the 5 dialog panels, you'll be taken back to the Start DB2 Trace Request panel. You must press Enter one more time from this panel to initiate your trace. After you press Enter, you are once again taken to the CT or Current Traces view. You should see your trace on this view. If your trace was set up with a future start time, you will see your trace name, and the status for that trace will be init. If you set up your trace to execute immediately by leaving the start time blank, or if you set it up to execute in the future and that time has been reached, you will see the status change to active. Press the PF11 key, page over to the right, and make sure that your logging status is active, and you will also be able to see the name of your trace log dataset. To see the threads that are captured in your trace, you should drill in on the trace ID or trace name column. The HT logs view will be displayed, and you will drill in on the number of records for the line that has your trace name on. You will then see a list of all of the threads that are captured in your trace. You can use the white highlighted tabs at the top of the view to summarize the threads that are captured in your trace by authorization ID, connection type, plan name, time, location, or correlation ID. You can also drill in on the end time, get into the details of the thread record. When you drill into the thread details, you have the ability to use your PF8 key to scroll down through all of the information, or you can use the highlighted tabs at the top of your screen to go to a specific area of the thread detail data. When you wish to stop your trace, go to the CT or current traces view by typing the command CT on your command line and pressing enter. You will then see the current traces view, and you should type a Z in the command field to the left of your trace name. This will stop your trace and the trace logging. You should verify that your trace is stopped by paging over to the right and displaying the status field. You should see a status of complete when your trace has been stopped. For more information on the MainView for DB2 product, you can also access www.bmc.com/support/product-documentation.